introduce yourselves, what you talk about, and take it from there?
Well, we weren't actually, we didn't form ourselves into a node, we just happened to start chatting to each other, so we didn't have a focus, we didn't have a particular group, and we didn't have a particular focus, but afterwards we thought there was one point that we would like to make. It's more a kind of a question or an issue for discussion. And I think that quite a lot of us have been looking at blogs recently, finding that often the blogs that are sort of owned by people individually with kind of individual author voices, we're finding put across very much a kind of an individual perspective. Now what we're finding is that the communicative style that's used in those blogs is very much about who the individual is and what they're doing with their lives and what they're getting up to and so on. Now, given the conversation that we had earlier this afternoon about trying to use e-learning to actually broaden access for communities which don't necessarily have access to the university, we take that point and we think it's a very valuable point, but we feel that the way the communicative style that's being used within blogs tends to be a communicative style which could actually be antithetical to a lot of the communities which are wanting to gain access to the university. A lot of communities, and there's a huge amount of scholarship in this area, show that people find it very difficult to talk about themselves. It's actually antithetical to a whole lot of cultural kind of conventions about writing about themselves, about portraying themselves, about, in a sense, kind of, blowing up themselves and saying, this is what I'm doing, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and so on. As well as perhaps the more kind of reflective diary writing kind of style is very much a kind of a Western elite educational kind of style.
Right.
And we'll just, we want to kind of put that to the group. Is there a contradiction? Might there be unintended consequences? You're saying that blogs and wikis are the way to go, they're the way to get people contributing, they're the way for people to start gaining access to resources which they don't necessarily have. But an unintended consequence of that might be that in fact they marginalise those who want to be part of those institutions even more, simply through the kind of communicative style that they're fostering themselves. So that was the kind of point that we really wanted to make, and the question that we really wanted to put to the group.
It's a fascinating point. Does anybody have anything to reply to that? I was expecting that, Lee. Come on.
Well, for a start, to be very careful about the points you're making about blogs, which I think is very valid, but then just to say in the same sense as blogs and wikis, because actually wiki is probably not the case, what you're saying. And then also to take the perspective that blogs are just that singular voice, when blogs could be used as a voice to represent a group of type of thinking, even though it's coming through a single voice. And not just that, but blogs, there's so many types of blogs these days that a blog could be a screencast blog. All it is just a quick demonstration on how to do this on your computer, or a quick demonstration on how to cook this. It is still an individual's perspective, which is a very valid point, I think, but it's in the connectivism of the blogs. So what we get when we go into forums is we get individuals posting in their forums, and we seem to perceive that as a communication space. We can get that in blogs as well, because using the RSS out of the blogs, which is the way for me to get, if everyone here is keeping a blog, then I can take the RSS and read everyone's blog in the one spot rather than having to remember to click you, and take hours remembering those sites. So in the bringing together of that, it becomes that forum of space. So I very rarely read a blog in its native location. I actually read the blog in its aggregated form.
Well, I think that might be even more problematic, because I think it's all a question of voice, and I think quite often communities of practice can actually become oppressive because particular voices get privileged because their communicative style is the privileged one in the community, in the so-called community of practice. I've had that countless times in my experience of working in stakeholder forums and so on. I've been in joint business in educational community, trade union stakeholder forums, where it's the business community's voice that gets privileged because the communicative style, which they're most used to, is the one that becomes naturalized in a group. And there's a silencing that kind of happens for the marginalized or more alternative voices. So I just want to make the point that I think that I don't think that the community of people who are working in blogs is taking account of that. The I voice, the authorial voice that's become naturalized in the blog community, and might even be worse when you're connecting, when you're not reading them, reading them in an edited environment. When you're reading them through RS's aggregated feed, you've got a bigger community of practice in which the dominant voice will become even more naturalized as the voice which is the one, that's already been privileged by Western elite forms of education.
It's certainly been a very, it's been a hot topic in our group, and not quite articulated that way. I think you've really taken it to a specific level.
There are some sites fighting back. Like this global village that from around the world produces voices of people that would otherwise never get into newspapers or into TV news, and they're deliberately looking for the marginalised voice on a global platform.
And there is A-listers that they're called, which is the people who are most vocal in their blogs and their respective the long tail, and the emerging etiquette for A-listers to reference the long tail more than just the A-listers and stuff like that.
But there is a mathematical formula that represents that as the power. I wish I could remember the name for it, but Howard Rheingold talks about that, where inevitably in any group it'll start clustering to that, whether it's people gathering to Paris Hilton or and
swarming.
No, it's not swarming, because swarming is very democratic and chaotic, because it can go anywhere. But that's precisely what you're talking about. But I think that if that's sort of consciously reflected on, then you then have the opportunity to try do something different. But I totally agree with you, and that's my central concern with blogging, where it's the way I look at it is forums are like the conversation is the context, the circle is the context, and people can dip in or out. Whereas for me, blogs are the soapbox, and you can be the Greek chorus. But so it's,
can I just throw in an example actually that both sort of supports what Kathy's just said and offers a sort of example to the contrary? Because there was an event in New Zealand earlier this year called the Blog Hui. Hui is a Maori word that means get together, meeting kind of thing. It was not terribly well attended in the event, but before it happened there was this absolute flame fest, if I'm using that jargon correctly, because the A-list bloggers in New Zealand hadn't heard of this, didn't know the people that were running it or involved in it. So somebody said, we don't know about it, it must be a scam. Now the organiser of that was really, really, put down and put off and upset by that. And, there was no way it was a scam. It was somebody coming from out of left field who had been a bit empowered by being on the Flexible Learning Leaders Programme and thought, here's a forum where I can have a voice. Set up this event with some really, sort of very well experienced and knowledgeable people coming to it. But it got this really bad press all across New Zealand, and it wasn't just bad press, it got really, really nasty. Anyway, it was, no publicity. Publicity is bad publicity. At the end of the day, people got to know about it through that phenomenon. The organiser did recover, and in fact it was a fantastic event at the end of the day, and the small number of people that were there, I think all learned something really valuable from it. Now the thing I took away from that was that a lot of the very popular bloggers never started out intending to be a voice that was listened to by other people. They were people that started out saying, oh, I'm passionate about this, here's a forum that I can have to talk about it. If anybody comes to read it, great. If nobody does, I'm still expressing myself, I'm archiving whatever my thoughts, my hyperlinks, all these kinds of things are. And some of them got really surprised when their blogs got really popular. So I hear what you say absolutely, that in certain communities some people and some voices can be silenced. I would just suggest that that's a reflection of the culture and society that we live in. It happens online and it happens offline. But with blogs, there is actually an opportunity for people who don't normally have a voice to have one. And some of the examples that came up at the Blog Hui that were so good in that respect were things like, there's the Iraq war situation, and there's people in Baghdad blogging out of there, and people are getting to know things that are just not what the Western press and the dominant voice would have you believe. So it's both silencing and liberating at the same time, and it just depends on the people and the use and the point of it, I guess.
And now is the time to influence that, because we're in a liminal space where where things are still starting to form. So you've got people who might do something on YouTube and suddenly they're famous overnight, or on MySpace. But then you've also got someone who does that, but turns out to be a 19-year-old New Zealand girl rather than a 15-year-old lost and lonely. So we're sort of living in a really weird Alice in Wonderland kind of time, I think, where we can influence those.
I mean, I think I take the points, and I think they're really valuable points. But I think what we're kind of blurring, and I think this happened in the conversation before too as well, is educational institutions. Is that, you know, the Salam Pax or whoever it was that writes about, you know, the war in Iraq, or, you know, the lonely 15-year-old, whatever, they are outside of educational institutions. We're here because we actually want to improve education and because we want to increase access to education. Are we doing something that might actually have the unintended consequences of reducing access for the people that we're actually trying to reach?
That's a great point.
We might.
That we might be.
I think if you're 100% a blogger, you perhaps risk that. I don't know a blogger that's 100% a blogger. I know a blogger that also edits Wikipedia and uploads photographs into that pool of photographic resources on a particular topic and participates in a number of e-learning lists, email lists and stuff like that. So I think most bloggers' blogging is just the one aspect of what they're communicating out. They are actually part of groups as anonymous or semi-anonymous.
My community of practice is Taylor. When I'm at work and I have a question, I ask Taylor, the Teach and Learn online group. I'm at work, teachers say to me, I've got a Word document I need to turn into a PDF or the other way around, how do I do it? I no longer try to find that information. I send an email to Tallow, and to my joy the other week I had 3 teachers who were very, well not very, but they don't sort of get how it works, but I typed it in and I'm still talking with them and bang, there's 4 answers already.
That's a community of 230 people that started happening.
Yeah, it just grew. No one gets paid to run it. But your question also makes me then wonder, where are the boundaries of what we call a classroom or an educational institution? And I have great concerns about thinking that, like, completely getting rid of those boundaries. So we're constantly talking in the rhetoric of lifelong learning and all this kind of stuff, but then we've also got those concerns about, you know, the quality issues. So it's all
I think
tricky.
I want to give an example of something that came up earlier before the tea break as well. I think it was Alexander who was talking about the Aboriginal woman who said, well, I was teaching in a shanty town in Cape Town in the early 1980s, using very much Freudian approaches to